The night Elara Whitcomb was publicly humiliated in front of 300 people, she made a choice that would shatter an empire. Standing in a ballroom that had once whispered her name with pity, she watched the man she'd trusted tear her heart apart for the world to see. Everyone expected her to crumble, to disappear, to become nothing again. But Elara didn't run that night. Not yet. First, she looked into the eyes of every person who'd ever dismissed her, and she smiled. Because she'd already decided, if this world wouldn't make room for her, she'd burn it down and build a better one. If you want to see how a forgotten daughter becomes the woman who changes everything, stay until the end. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. Now, let's go back to where it all began. The Whitcomb house smelled like desperation and rosewater. Elara knew this because she'd spent 19 years breathing it in, watching her mother douse everything. The curtains, the furniture, even the servants' uniforms. In expensive perfume, as if scent alone could mask the rot underneath. The rot of a family clinging to a title that meant less with each passing year, of 4 daughters who needed to marry well or face ruin, of a father who drank himself silent every night in his study while the world outside their gates moved on without them. Straighten up, Elara. You look like a wilted flower. Her mother's voice cut across the morning room, sharp and familiar as a blade she'd felt 1,000 times before. Elara didn't flinch. She'd learned years ago that flinching only made it worse. Yes, mother. She adjusted her posture, though it wouldn't matter. It never mattered. Her mother's eyes would always find something wrong. The angle of her chin, the plainness of her features, the way she seemed to take up space without filling it the way her sisters did. Across from her, those sisters gleamed like different facets of the same diamond. Vivienne, the eldest, sat with her spine so straight it could have been carved from marble, her golden hair swept up in an elaborate style that had probably taken her maid 2 hours to perfect. Everything about Vivienne was perfect. Her posture, her complexion, her ability to say exactly what people wanted to hear while meaning absolutely nothing. Beside her, Celeste practiced her laugh. Not a real laugh. No one in the Whitcomb house laughed for real anymore. But the musical, calculated sound she'd perfected for parties. Light, feminine, designed to make men feel clever without actually engaging her brain. Do it again, their mother instructed. Less hoarse, more bell. Celeste obeyed, adjusting the pitch until their mother nodded approval. Then there was Margot, 16 and already more beautiful than Elara would ever be, studying her reflection in a hand mirror with the intensity of a general planning a siege. Margot understood something the others sometimes forgot. Beauty was a weapon, and like any weapon, it required maintenance, strategy, and perfect timing. And then there was Elara. Your turn, her mother said, voice flat with the exhaustion of low expectations. Practice your introduction. Elara set down her tea. Mother, I've practiced it 100 times. And you'll practice it 100 more until you stop sounding like you're reciting a funeral rite. Her mother's fingers drummed against the arm of her chair. The Thornfield Ball is in 3 days. 3 days, Elara. This is our last real opportunity before the season ends, and I will not have you sabotaging your sister's chances with your demeanor. Sabotaging. As if Elara's mere existence was an act of warfare against her family's prospects. Go on, Vivienne said, not looking up from the letter she was writing. Everything Vivienne did was perfect, including her penmanship. Let's hear it. Elara stood, smoothed her dress, pale blue, because her mother said colors washed her out, and recited the words she'd been taught since she could speak in full sentences. Lord Whitcomb's 4th daughter, Miss Elara Whitcomb. It's an honor to make your acquaintance. Silence. The kind that felt like judgment taking physical form. Better, her mother finally said, though her expression suggested otherwise. But try to smile. You look like you're being led to the gallows. Maybe because I feel like I am, Elara muttered, too quiet for her mother to hear, but loud enough that Margot snorted into her tea. Their mother's attention snapped to Margot like a whip crack. Something amusing? No, mother. Margot's face went smooth and innocent, a trick she'd mastered by age 12. The morning dragged on. Lessons in posture, conversation, the art of laughing at jokes that weren't funny, and pretending interest in men who were interesting as dry toast. By the time their mother finally dismissed them, Elara felt scraped hollow, like someone had taken a spoon to her insides and removed anything resembling her actual personality. She escaped to the library. It was the only room in the house that felt like it belonged to her, though even that was an illusion. Her father had built the collection, but he never read anymore. Her sisters avoided it like they avoided anything that might require actual thought. So Elara had claimed it by default, the way she'd claimed everything else in her life, through absence and neglect. She pulled down a worn copy of Wollstonecraft and sank into the chair by the window, letting the words wash over her like medicine. I do not wish women to have power over men, but over themselves. Still reading that feminist nonsense? Elara didn't look up. She knew Vivian's voice the way she knew the sound of rain. Constant, unavoidable, occasionally pleasant, but usually just there. It's not nonsense. No, you're right. It's worse than nonsense. It's irrelevant. Vivian perched on the edge of the desk, careful not to wrinkle her dress. You know what Mother says about your reading habits? Mother says a lot of things. And you ignore most of them, which is why you're 19 and haven't had a single serious suitor. Vivian's voice wasn't cruel exactly. It never was. She had a gift for delivering devastating truths in a tone that sounded almost concerned. The Thornfield ball is important, Elara. Lord Ashford will be there. He's interested in me, but he's also interested in our family's wholeness. If you embarrass us, I won't embarrass anyone. I'll stand in the corner, smile politely, and count the hours until I can come home and read in peace. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Vivian stood, smoothed her skirts. You're not stupid, Elara. You're actually quite clever when you bother to be, but cleverness doesn't matter if no one wants to marry it. And if we don't all marry well... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. If they didn't marry well, the Whitcomb name would die. Their father's debts would consume what little was left. They'd be ruined, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, quietly, the way families had been ruined for generations. After Vivian left, Elara sat in the silence and let herself imagine, just for a moment, a different life. One where her worth wasn't measured in marriage prospects and childbearing potential, where she could read what she wanted, say what she thought, exist as something more than a decorative object waiting to be claimed. But imagination didn't pay debts. It didn't save families. It didn't change the fundamental architecture of a world built on women's submission. So she closed the book, straightened her shoulders, and went to prepare for the ball that would, she assumed, be exactly like every other ball, an evening of being invisible while her sisters shone. She was wrong. The Thornfield estate sprawled across the countryside like a stone beast, all Gothic spires and manicured gardens that probably required an army of servants to maintain. Elara had been to dozens of estates like this. Every family in their circle seemed to compete for who could build the most ostentatious monument to their own wealth. But Thornfield had something the others lacked: a reputation. Remember, their mother hissed as their carriage rolled up the drive. You speak only when spoken to. You smile constantly, and you do not, under any circumstances, mention politics, philosophy, or anything that requires more than 3 words to explain. Am I understood? Yes, Mother, they chorused, Elara included. The ballroom blazed with light, chandeliers dripping crystal, walls lined with mirrors that multiplied the crowd until it seemed like thousands instead of hundreds. Music swirled through the air, punctuated by laughter that sounded rehearsed, conversations that meant nothing. The eternal dance of people pretending to enjoy themselves. Elara's sisters scattered immediately, drawn to clusters of eligible men like moths to flame. She watched Vivian glide toward Lord Ashford with practiced grace, watched Celeste deploy her perfected laugh on a group of young officers, watched Margot position herself near the refreshment table where the most traffic flowed. Then she did what she always did, found a corner, claimed it, and waited for the evening to end. Not dancing? The voice came from her left. Older woman, maybe 50, with silver hair and eyes that looked like they'd seen through 1,000 polite lies. I prefer observation to participation, Elara said, then mentally kicked herself. Too honest, too strange. Exactly the kind of thing her mother told her not to say. But the woman laughed. Smart girl. You learn more from watching. Who are you watching? Elara hesitated, then figured she'd already committed to honesty. Everyone? The patterns. Who talks to whom? Who gets ignored? How power moves through a room like weather. Like weather. I like that. The woman sipped her champagne. You're one of the Whitcomb girls. The 4th one. The spare, spare, spare. It should have stung, but the woman said it with such matter-of-fact kindness that Elara almost smiled. Something like that. I'm Lady Thornfield. This is my son's circus. I just live in it. She gestured vaguely at the crowd. He should be making an appearance soon, probably making some dramatic entrance because he thinks it's funny to watch people scramble. Your son sounds exhausting. Lady Thornfield's laugh was real this time, loud enough that several nearby conversations paused. Oh, you have no idea, but he's... She stopped mid-sentence, her attention caught by something across the room. The crowd had shifted, conversations dying like waves pulling back from shore. Elara followed the silence to its source and saw him. Rowan Blackthorn. She knew the name, everyone did. Duke of Thornfield at 28, ruthless in business, savage in politics, rumored to have destroyed 3 family fortunes before breakfast just because he was bored. He'd been engaged twice, broke both engagements with surgical precision, and left a trail of broken hearts and bruised egos across the entire social season. He was also, Elara noted with detached observation, absurdly handsome. Dark hair, darker eyes, the kind of face that belonged on ancient coins or Renaissance paintings. He moved through the crowd like he owned it, which, technically, he did, accepting greetings with minimal acknowledgement, scanning the room with an expression that suggested he found the whole thing tedious. Here we go, Lady Thornfield muttered. Watch this, it's always entertaining. Young women positioned themselves in his path like chess pieces. Mothers steered their daughters into strategic locations. Fathers adjusted their postures, ready to facilitate introductions. The whole room reorganized itself around his presence, a solar system realigning to accommodate a new sun. Rowan ignored all of it. He moved past Lady Ashford's daughter, beautiful, wealthy, perfect pedigree, past the Marshall twins who were rumored to have practiced fainting in case an opportunity arose, past a dozen other eligible, eager, immaculately presented young women, and stopped in front of Elara. The silence went from noticeable to deafening. You, he said, voice low enough that only she could hear, are the only person in this room who isn't looking at me like I'm a piece of meat. Elara's brain stuttered. What? You were watching the room, not me. Everyone else has been staring at me since I walked in, but you were watching them watch me. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, nothing like the bored aristocrat she'd expected. Why? Because you're not interesting. The words escaped before she could stop them, and she immediately wanted to sink through the floor. I mean, you are, obviously, you're a duke, but the patterns of human behavior are more interesting than any individual human. He smiled, and it was nothing like the smiles she'd seen all evening. This one reached his eyes. Go on. I shouldn't have. My mother always says I talk too much about the wrong things. Your mother sounds tedious. Keep talking. So she did. Later, she wouldn't remember exactly what she said. Something about crowd dynamics, about how power created invisible architecture in a room, how you could map relationships by watching who spoke to whom and in what order. She talked, and he listened, actually listened, asked questions that suggested he understood what she was saying. Around them, the ballroom held its breath. Dance with me, Rowan said finally. I'm not a good dancer. I don't care. Dance with me anyway. He offered his hand. Elara stared at it like it might explode, very aware that every eye in the room was now locked on her, that her mother was probably having a coronary, that her sisters were witnessing the impossible. She took his hand. The waltz was a disaster. She stepped on his feet twice, lost the rhythm 3 times, and nearly walked them both into another couple. But Rowan laughed, a real laugh, not the practiced society version, and kept dancing, kept her talking, kept looking at her like she was the only person in the room. You're different, he said, halfway through the second dance. Everyone else here is performing. You're just here. Is that good or bad? It's honest. I like honest. When the dance ended, he didn't release her hand immediately. Instead, he leaned close enough that she could smell cedar and something darker, something that made her pulse jump. Tomorrow, the coffee house on Market Street. 2 o'clock. Come. That's not a question. No. His smile was dangerous. It's not. Then he was gone, cutting through the crowd like it didn't exist, leaving Elara standing alone in the center of the ballroom with 300 pairs of eyes boring into her and absolutely no idea what had just happened. Her mother appeared at her elbow, face pale with shock. "What did he say to you?" Elara's voice felt far away. "He asked me to dance." "I saw that part. What else?" But Elara couldn't answer. She was too busy replaying the last 10 minutes, trying to understand how her entire life had just shifted on its axis, because a duke had stopped in front of her instead of walking past. The rest of the evening blurred. Her sisters surrounded her, demanding details. Lord Ashford congratulated their mother on Elara's unexpected success. Strangers who'd never noticed her before suddenly remembered her name. But Elara barely heard any of it. She was already thinking about tomorrow, about the coffee house, about the way Rowan had looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve. She didn't sleep that night. In the morning, her mother called her into the sitting room. "Sit." Elara sat. Her mother paced, which was never a good sign. Vivian stood by the window, expression unreadable. Celeste and Margot flanked the fireplace like sentries. "The Duke of Thornfield," her mother began, voice carefully controlled, "showed you marked attention last night. This is unprecedented. It's also dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "Because you're you, Elara. You're smart, which makes you interesting for about 5 minutes, and then men realize you don't know when to stop talking. You read the wrong books. You have opinions about things women shouldn't have opinions about. You're not—" She gestured vaguely at Vivian. "You're not equipped for this." "For what?" "For being chosen by someone like him." Vivian's voice was soft, almost kind. "Mother's right. You'll say something wrong, do something strange, and he'll realize he made a mistake. And when he does, it won't just ruin you, it'll ruin all of us. People remember failures more than they remember successes." Elara looked at her sisters, at her mother, at the women who were supposed to love her most in the world. All she saw was fear. Not for her, for themselves. "What do you want me to do?" she asked quietly. "Don't go tomorrow," her mother said. "Send a polite note declining. Say you're ill. We'll position Vivian as the more appropriate choice. She can handle someone like the Duke. You can't." Something hot and sharp lodged in Elara's chest. "You want me to refuse?" "I want you to be realistic. Men like Rowan Blackthorne don't marry girls like you. They play with them, get bored, and move on. Don't mistake one dance for a future." "But what if—" "There is no what if." Her mother's voice went cold. "You will not embarrass this family with delusions of adequacy. You will decline gracefully, and we will salvage what we can from this situation. Am I clear?" Elara stood slowly, looked at each of them in turn. "No? Excuse me?" "I said no. I'm going to meet him, and if he gets bored, if he realizes I'm not what he expected, fine. But I'm not going to refuse before I even try, just because you're all too scared to believe I might be worth choosing." She walked out before her mother could respond, climbed the stairs to her room, and locked the door. Outside, she heard her mother's voice rising, heard Vivian's calm tones trying to de-escalate, heard Margot's sharp laugh that meant trouble. Inside, Elara pressed her forehead against the door and let herself shake. For the first time in her life, someone had looked at her and seen something worth noticing, worth talking to, worth spending time with. And her own family wanted her to walk away from it because they couldn't imagine a world where she deserved good things. She thought about Wollstonecraft, about power over yourself, about the choice between safety and truth. Then she thought about tomorrow at 2 o'clock, and she made her decision. The coffee house smelled like roasted beans and possibility. Elara had never been here before. Respectable young women didn't frequent coffee houses alone, but the moment she stepped through the door, she understood why people came. It was loud but not chaotic, full but not crowded, alive in a way ballrooms never were. People argued about politics at corner tables. A woman read poetry aloud to a small crowd. Someone laughed with their whole body, not the restrained society version. It felt real. "You came." Rowan sat at a table by the window, dressed casually in a way that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. He stood when he saw her, pulled out a chair with his own hands instead of waiting for a servant. "You thought I wouldn't?" I thought your family would talk you out of it. He signaled for coffee. Your mother looked like she wanted to kill me last night. She wants me to decline your attentions and position my older sister as a better option. What do you want? No one had asked her that in so long that the question momentarily stunned her. I want to know why you stopped in front of me. Because you were the only real person in that room. That's a line. It's the truth. The coffee arrived. He waited until she'd taken a sip before continuing. I'm tired, Elara. Tired of performance. Tired of people who say what they think I want to hear. Tired of women who've been trained since birth to be decorative and useless. You looked at me like I was an interruption to something more interesting, and that was the most honest thing I'd experienced in months. So this is what? A novelty? No. His voice went serious. This is me making a choice I should have made years ago, to stop playing the game and find someone who sees it for what it is. And what is it? A trap, for both of us. You're trapped by expectations of what women should be. I'm trapped by expectations of what dukes should want. But maybe... He leaned forward. Maybe if we're both smart about it, we can spring the trap together. They talked for 3 hours. About everything. Politics, philosophy, the absurdity of social rules that govern their lives. He told her about the crushing weight of responsibility, of managing estates and businesses, while everyone assumed he just spent money and broke hearts. She told him about being the spare, about watching her sisters perform femininity like it was an Olympic sport while she couldn't find the rhythm. Come to dinner, he said finally. Tomorrow night, my house, just the two of us. That's scandalous. I know, come anyway. You say that a lot. I mean it a lot. He stood, helped her with her chair. I'm not interested in courtship, Elara. I'm interested in partnership. If that scares you, walk away now. But if it doesn't, he handed her his card. Then show up tomorrow and we'll figure out what that means together. She took the card, felt the weight of it like a promise or a threat. Okay? Okay? I'll come to dinner, but Rowan? She met his eyes, made sure he was listening. If this is a game, if you're bored and I'm an experiment, tell me now, because I've been dismissed my whole life and I won't survive being dismissed by someone I actually respect. His expression softened into something that might have been admiration. This is not a game, and you deserve better than dismissal. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock. Come ready to be honest. I don't know how to be anything else. Good. She walked home through streets that looked different, like the world had reorganized itself while she wasn't paying attention. By the time she reached the Whitcomb house, her hands had stopped shaking and her heart had stopped racing, and she felt, for the first time in 19 years, like she might be capable of something extraordinary. Her mother was waiting in the entrance hall. Where have you been? The coffee house, with the Duke. The silence was arctic. You defied me. Yes. You went to meet him anyway. Yes. Her mother's face did something complicated. Anger, fear, shock, all competing for space. Do you have any idea what you've done? How this looks? I know exactly how it looks, and I don't care. You should care. When he ruins you, and he will ruin you, Elara, because men like that always do. It will destroy all of us. Is that what you want, to drag your sisters down with you? Elara thought about the coffee house, about real conversation and honest laughter, about the way Rowan had looked at her like she was worth listening to. I want, she said slowly, to find out if someone might actually choose me for me. Not because I'm pretty or perfect or obedient, just because I'm interesting enough to talk to. And if that ruins us, then maybe we deserve to be ruined. She walked past her mother, past Vivian hovering in the doorway, past the weight of their disappointment and up the stairs to her room. Behind her, she heard her mother's voice crack. You'll regret this. Maybe. Probably. But for the first time in her life, Elara was making her own choices and living with her own consequences. And that felt like freedom. Dinner at Thornfield Manor wasn't what Elara expected. She'd imagined something formal, crystal and candlelight, servants hovering, the weight of propriety pressing down on every word. Instead, Rowan led her past the grand dining room to a smaller space she suspected most guests never saw. a library that made her family's collection look like a bookshelf in a closet. Floor-to-ceiling volumes, leather-bound and well-worn, the kind of books people actually read instead of just displayed. "This is where I eat when I'm not being a duke," he said, gesturing to a table set for two near the fireplace. "Simple dishes, no unnecessary forks. I thought you might prefer it." "I do." She touched the spine of a nearby book. Rousseau. "You've actually read these?" "Most of them, some twice. A few I threw across the room." "Which ones?" "The ones that were wrong but couldn't admit it." He pulled out her chair. "The worst kind of writing is the kind that's almost right but misses by inches. Makes you want to argue with dead men." They settled in, and for the first few minutes, Elara felt the familiar anxiety of being watched, evaluated, tested. But Rowan didn't perform. He ate like a normal person, argued about philosophy without trying to win, listened when she talked without that glazed expression men got when women spoke for more than 30 seconds. "Your family didn't want you to come," he said halfway through the meal. Not a question. "My family wants me to disappear until one of my sisters catches a suitable husband. Then I'm allowed to exist again, preferably somewhere far away where I won't embarrass anyone." "That's brutal." "That's reality." She set down her fork. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why me?" "Actually, not the poetic version about honesty and real people. The real reason." Rowan leaned back, studying her with those dark eyes that seemed to see through surfaces. "You want the truth?" "I wouldn't have asked otherwise. I'm 28 years old. I've been managing the duchy since I was 20, when my father had a stroke and decided dying slowly was more interesting than living competently. I've spent 8 years being paraded in front of every eligible woman in England, and they all want the same thing. The title, the money, the power of being a duchess. They don't see me. They see a crown they can wear. That's not an answer. I'm getting there." He poured more wine. "Last month I was in London for Parliament. There was a debate about factory conditions, children working 14-hour days, people dying from machinery that had no safety measures, basic human decency stuff. And you know what the other lords said? That regulating business would hurt profits. That poor people should be grateful for any work. That children needed discipline, not protection. That's horrific. That's normal for them." His voice went hard. "And the women at the parties after those debates? They didn't care. They'd smile and laugh and talk about fashion while we discussed sentencing children to death by exhaustion. None of them cared about anything real." "So you wanted someone who cared about real things?" "I wanted someone who could see the game for what it is and still choose to be human anyway." He met her eyes. "You stood in that corner at the ball, watching people like they were an ecosystem. You see the patterns, the power structures, the ways people manipulate each other. Most people who see that become cynical, but you're not cynical. You're angry." "I'm not angry." "Yes, you are. You're furious at a world that wastes half its population's intelligence because of what's between their legs. You're angry that your sisters have to perform idiocy to survive. You're angry that you've been told your whole life that you're wrong for thinking. And that anger?" He smiled. "That's the most honest thing I've ever seen." Elara felt something crack open in her chest. No one had ever named it before. The rage she'd spent 19 years burying under politeness and silence and good behavior. "So what do you want from me?" she asked quietly. "Partnership, you said. What does that actually mean?" "It means I want to build something different. I have resources, power, access to rooms where decisions get made. But I'm one voice, and I'm still playing by their rules because I have to. But you?" He leaned forward. "You don't have anything to lose. You're already dismissed, already invisible. That makes you dangerous." "Dangerous how?" "Because you can say things I can't, do things I can't, push boundaries I can't push without losing the power that makes me useful in the first place. Together we could actually change things, start factories with fair wages, fund schools for poor children, challenge laws that treat women like property, but only if you're willing to be the sharp edge of the blade while I'm the handle." It was insane, revolutionary, terrifying. "My family would disown me. Probably. Society would destroy me. Definitely. I'd lose everything. Everything except yourself." He reached across the table, stopped just short of touching her hand. I won't lie to you, Elara. This would be hard. Brutal, even. People will call you a whore, a social climber, a woman who forgot her place. They'll say I'm bewitched or insane or slumming for novelty. But if we do this right, if we commit completely, we could build something that outlasts us both. She looked at his hand, hovering near hers, thought about the coffee house, about real conversation, about feeling like her brain mattered for the first time in her life. I have conditions. Name them. I won't change. I won't pretend to be less intelligent or less angry or less anything just to make people comfortable. If I'm going to do this, I do it as myself, completely. Agreed. And if you get bored, if this becomes a game or an experiment or a phase, you tell me immediately. You don't string me along out of politeness or guilt. I swear it. And she took a breath. And you never, ever ask me to be like them, like Vivian or Celeste or any of the women you've rejected. Because if you wanted that, you wouldn't be here with me. Rowan's expression softened into something that looked almost like relief. Those are the easiest conditions I've ever agreed to. Then yes, I'll partner with you. I'll be your blade. He took her hand then, and the touch felt like a contract signing and a declaration of war all at once. We start tomorrow, he said. There's a charity meeting. Wives of lords pretending to care about poor children while actually just competing over who can wear the most expensive dress. I want you there with me. They'll eat me alive. Let them try, On said. The charity meeting was held at the Ashford estate, and Elara knew she was in trouble the moment she walked through the door. Every woman in the room was a masterpiece of presentation. Hair perfect, dresses worth more than most families earned in a year, jewelry that caught the light like tiny weapons. They moved in clusters, laughing their practiced laughs, touching each other's arms in gestures of false intimacy. And they all stopped talking when Elara entered on Rowan's arm. Ladies, Rowan said, voice cutting through the silence like a knife. I'd like to introduce Miss Elara Whitcomb. She'll be joining our discussions going forward. The silence stretched, pulled tight as a rope about to snap. Then Lady Ashford, Vivian's potential mother-in-law, stepped forward with a smile that could have cut glass. Miss Whitcomb, how unexpected. I wasn't aware you had interest in charitable works. Translation, what are you doing here, spare daughter? I'm learning, Elara said, keeping her voice steady. The Duke has been kind enough to educate me. How generous of him. Lady Ashford's eyes flicked to Rowan, then back to Elara. Though I must say these meetings can be quite complex. We discuss budgets, allocations, strategic planning. Not really the sort of thing most young ladies have the background to contribute to. I'm a quick study. I'm sure you are, dear, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable observing for now. We have refreshments in the sitting room, much more suited to your temperament. Rowan's hand tightened slightly on her arm, a warning or encouragement, she couldn't tell. Miss Whitcomb will participate fully. She has insights I value. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. They took their seats around a long table, Elara between Rowan and a woman whose expression suggested she'd just discovered something unpleasant on her shoe. Across from them, a dozen women who'd spent their entire lives perfecting the art of social warfare. Lady Ashford called the meeting to order. As you all know, we're discussing funding for the St. Catherine's Home for Orphaned Children. The proposed budget is £300 for the year. That's not enough. The words left Elara's mouth before she could stop them. Silence. Every eye swiveled to her. I beg your pardon? Lady Ashford's voice could have frosted windows. £300 for a year, for food, clothing, education, housing. That's less than most of us spend on a single ball gown. Elara felt Rowan's warning pressure again, but pushed forward anyway. If we actually care about these children, we should fund them properly. And what would you suggest, Miss Whitcomb? Another woman, Lady Pemberton, dripping with diamonds, leaned forward with predatory interest. Since you seem to be an expert, I'd suggest we start by cutting our own expenses and donating the difference. No one at this table needs 10 dresses when we could clothe 50 children with the same money. The room erupted. That's absurd. Who does she think she is? The Duke has brought a radical... Rowan's voice cut through the chaos. She's right. The noise stopped like someone had snapped a whip. She's right, he repeated, calmer now. We sit here pretending to care while spending more on our appearances than on the people we claim to help. It's hypocrisy, and we all know it. Your Grace, Lady Ashford said, voice trembling with controlled fury. With all due respect, Miss Whitcomb doesn't understand how these things work. We have social obligations, expectations. We can't just... Can't what? Actually help people? Elara couldn't stop herself now. Or is this whole thing just theater, a way to feel good about ourselves while changing nothing? That is quite enough. Lady Ashford stood, shaking with rage. I will not be lectured on charity by a girl who's contributed nothing to society, whose own family considers her an embarrassment, who has somehow convinced the Duke to entertain her bizarre notions. Watch yourself. Rowan's voice went deadly quiet. You're speaking about my guest. Your guest has insulted every woman at this table. She's accused us of not caring about the very people we've dedicated our time to helping. She's told you the truth, and you can't stand it. Rowan stood, helped Elara to her feet. This meeting is over. I'll be withdrawing my funding from any charity that values appearance over actual results. Ladies, thank you for your time. He walked out, Elara beside him, leaving behind a room full of shocked faces and furious whispers. They made it to the carriage before Elara's hand started shaking. I'm sorry, she said. I shouldn't have. They're going to crucify you for that. Don't apologize. You were magnificent. I was a disaster. I just destroyed your reputation and probably mine, and definitely any chance my sisters have of marrying well, because now everyone knows the Whitcomb family has a radical daughter who can't keep her mouth shut. Elara, look at me. She did. His expression was intense, almost fierce. You did exactly what I hoped you would do. You called them on their bullshit without flinching. You refused to play their game. That's what partnership means. That's what I need. But the fallout will be brutal, I know, but necessary. Real change doesn't happen when everyone's comfortable. The carriage rolled through the streets, and Elara watched London slide by through the window. Somewhere out there the gossip was already spreading. The fourth Whitcomb daughter embarrassing herself again. The Duke losing his mind over a nobody. The scandal that would echo through drawing rooms for weeks. Rowan, she said quietly, what if I can't do this? What if I'm not strong enough? Then we'll find out together. But I don't think you're weak, Elara. I think you've been told you're weak for so long that you started believing it. But weak women don't stand in front of Lady Ashford and tell her she's a hypocrite. Weak women don't risk everything for the truth. Brave women or stupid women? Sometimes those are the same thing. She almost laughed. Almost. The carriage stopped in front of the Whitcomb house, and dread settled in her stomach like a stone. They're going to know, she said. By now someone's already told my mother what happened. Do you want me to come in with you? No, this I have to face alone. He nodded, understanding. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. My study. We have work to do. I'll be there. She stepped out of the carriage and walked to her door like a prisoner approaching execution. Popet. Her mother was waiting in the sitting room. So were her sisters, and from the expressions on their faces, they'd heard everything. Sit down. Her mother's voice was arctic. Elara sat. Lady Pemberton sent a note. Very detailed, very thorough. Would you like to explain why you decided to humiliate your entire family in front of the most influential women in London? I didn't mean to humiliate anyone. You called them hypocrites. You suggested they were wasting money on clothing instead of helping children. You implied their charity was theater. Her mother's hands shook. Do you have any idea what you've done? I told the truth. The truth? Her mother's laugh was brittle. The truth doesn't matter, Elara. Perception matters. Reputation matters. And you've just destroyed ours completely. Vivian stood, moved to the window. When she spoke, her voice was eerily calm. Lord Ashford's mother informed my potential fiancé that our family is unsuitable. He's withdrawing his interest. The words hit like a physical blow. Vivian, don't. Vivian's back stayed turned. I've spent 3 years cultivating that relationship. 3 years of perfect behavior, perfect conversation, being exactly who he needed me to be. And you destroyed it in one afternoon because you couldn't keep your opinions to yourself. I didn't know. You never do. Celeste's voice was sharp as broken glass. You never think about consequences, never consider anyone but yourself. You wanted to be interesting to the Duke, so you said whatever came into your head without caring who it hurt. Margot just stared at her with something that looked like betrayal. I'm sorry, Elara whispered. I didn't think. That's the problem. Her mother stood, and the exhaustion on her face aged her 10 years. You never think. You just act and the rest of us pay for it. Well, no more. You want to chase your radical ideas and ruin yourself with the Duke? Fine, do it. But you'll do it somewhere else. What? You're leaving. Tomorrow. There's a cousin in Bath who needs a companion. You'll go there, stay out of sight until this scandal dies down, and maybe, we can salvage something from the wreckage of your selfishness. You're sending me away? I'm protecting your sisters from your mistakes. One of us has to. Elara looked around the room, at Vivian's rigid back, at Celeste's angry eyes, at Margot's disappointment, at her mother's exhausted fury. What if I refuse? Then I'll cut you off completely. No money, no home, no family. You'll be on your own with nothing but your precious principles to keep you warm. Her mother's voice cracked. Is that what you want? To destroy everything for a man who'll get bored of you in 3 months? The question hung in the air like smoke. Elara thought about Rowan, about partnership and purpose, and feeling like her mind mattered, about the possibility of building something real in a world made of performances. Then she thought about her sisters, about Vivian's lost engagement, about the years of careful social construction she'd demolished in one afternoon. I need time to think. You have until morning. Make your choice, Elara. Your family or your delusions. You can't have both. She didn't sleep. Instead, she paced her room until dawn, turning the impossible choice over in her mind like a puzzle with no solution. Stay and lose everything she'd discovered with Rowan. The purpose, the partnership, the feeling of being valued for her mind instead of dismissed for her differences. Go and abandon her sisters to face consequences she'd created. Live in Bath as a forgotten companion, watching life happen to other people while she faded into obscurity. Neither option felt survivable. At 7 in the morning, Vivian knocked on her door. Can I come in? Elara opened it. Her sister looked like she hadn't slept either. I'm not here to yell at you, Vivian said quietly, settling into the chair by the window. I'm here to help you understand something. What? Why Mother's really sending you away. It's not about Lord Ashford, not really. It's about you choosing yourself for the first time in your life, and she can't control that. Elara sat on the bed. I don't understand. Mother spent her whole life being perfect. Perfect daughter, perfect wife, perfect mother. She did everything right, and it still wasn't enough. Father's debts, society's expectations, the constant fear of ruin. She made herself into exactly what she was supposed to be, and she's miserable. That's not my fault. No. But you're proof that another way is possible. You're choosing something real over something safe, and that terrifies her. Because if you succeed, if you actually build a life on your own terms, it means she wasted hers, and she can't face that. What about you? Elara asked. Your engagement. I destroyed that. Lord Ashford was a coward who'd rather marry someone bland than defend someone interesting. You didn't destroy anything worth having. Vivian smiled, tired but real. I'm not saying it doesn't hurt. It does. But maybe it's time I stop performing too. What are you saying? I'm saying go. Go be with the Duke. Build your partnership. Fight your battles. Don't let Mother's fear become your prison. Vivian stood, moved to the door. And Elara, when you change the world, remember your sisters. We might need rescuing someday. She left before Elara could respond. At 9:30, Elara packed a small bag. At 9:45, she walked downstairs where her mother waited. Have you decided? Yes. And? I'm choosing myself. Her mother's face went pale. Then you're no longer my daughter. You understand that? You walk out that door, you're on your own. No money, no family, no safety net. Just your foolish pride and a man who'll discard you when you're no longer entertaining. Maybe. But at least I'll know I tried to be something real instead of spending my life as a decoration in someone else's collection. She walked past her mother, out the door, into a carriage she'd hired with the last of her personal funds. The driver looked at her questioningly. "Thornfield Manor," she said. "Fast as you can." Rowan was in his study when she arrived, surrounded by papers. He looked up when the door opened, surprise flickering across his face. "You're early, and you have a bag." "My mother disowned me. I'm homeless, penniless, and apparently no longer part of the Whitcomb family. So I hope you meant what you said about partnership, because I'm all in now, completely." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood, crossed to where she was standing, and took both her hands in his. "No pressure, then?" "None at all." "Elara, this is real now, not theoretical. If we fail, you have nothing to go back to." "I know." "And you're still choosing this?" "I'm choosing me. The rest we'll figure out together." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, admiration, maybe something deeper. "Then we'd better make sure we don't fail." He pulled her into the room, spread papers across the desk. Plans for schools, factories, housing for workers, budgets and strategies, and a vision of something better than the world they'd inherited. "Here," he said, pointing to a proposal, "women's education. Real education, not finishing school. Mathematics, science, philosophy. We fund it, run it independent of church or state control. Give women options besides marriage or servitude." "That's revolutionary." "That's necessary." He met her eyes. "You ready to be a revolutionary?" Outside, Elara could almost hear the gossip spreading. The Whitcomb girl who'd been disowned. The Duke who'd chosen a nobody. The scandal that would define a season. Let them talk. She had work to do. "I'm ready," she said. "Let's burn it down." The first school opened 3 months later in a building that had once been a warehouse. Rowan bought it for a fraction of what he'd spent on his last horse, gutted it, and turned it into something that looked more like hope than any institution Elara had ever seen. 50 girls showed up the first day. Daughters of factory workers, shopkeepers, washerwomen. Girls who'd never held a book that wasn't a Bible, never been told their minds were worth cultivating, never imagined a future beyond servitude or marriage to men who'd work them to death. Elara stood at the front of the classroom and felt terror claw at her throat. "My name is Miss Whitcomb," she said, and her voice only shook a little. "I'm here to teach you mathematics. Not because it's ladylike or proper, but because numbers are power. If you can calculate costs, manage budgets, understand interest rates, no one can cheat you. No one can tell you you're too stupid to understand. You'll know." A girl in the back row, maybe 12, all bones and suspicion, raised her hand. "Why would you teach us? Ladies don't care about girls like us." "You're right, most don't. But I'm not most ladies." Elara picked up the chalk. "I'm the daughter no one wanted. The one they said was too strange, too opinionated, too wrong. And I'm here because if someone had told me when I was your age that my brain mattered, that thinking was valuable, that I didn't have to shrink myself to survive, maybe I wouldn't have spent 19 years believing I was worthless." The room went quiet. The girl in the back nodded slowly. They started with basic arithmetic. By the end of the week, half the class could calculate percentages faster than most of the men who employed their parents. By the end of the month, the complaints started. The letters arrived at Thornfield in batches. Anonymous at first, then increasingly bold. Factory owners furious that their workers' daughters were getting ideas. Shopkeepers concerned about girls who questioned prices. Mothers worried their daughters would become unmarriageable if they learned too much. "This one's creative," Rowan said, reading over breakfast. "Says you're corrupting the moral fiber of England's youth by teaching them to think independently. Apparently independent thought leads directly to prostitution. That doesn't even make sense. Hysteria rarely does." He tossed the letter aside. "But it's getting worse. 3 of the landlords on my board are demanding I shut the school down. They're threatening to withdraw their investments in the other projects if I don't." Elara set down her tea carefully. "What did you tell them?" "I told them to go to hell, politely, with excellent penmanship." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "But Elara, we need to be prepared. This is escalating. The people who benefit from ignorance don't like being challenged." "So we stop?" So we fight smarter. That afternoon, they met with a journalist, a woman named Rebecca Marsh, who wrote for a progressive paper that most respectable people claimed never to read, but somehow always knew the contents of. She sat in Rowan's study, notebook open, eyes sharp as knives. "Tell me why this matters," she said without preamble. "Not the philosophy, the real reason." Elara thought about the girl in the back row, about 19 years of being told she was wrong, about every woman she'd ever met who'd been trained to be decorative and useless. "Because half the population is wasted," she said. "Because we're told we're too delicate for mathematics, too emotional for business, too weak for anything that matters." And it's a lie. We're not weak. We're deliberately kept ignorant because ignorance is easier to control than intelligence. Rebecca's pen moved across the page. "And you're teaching them mathematics specifically because money is power. If you can't calculate worth, you can't negotiate wages. If you can't manage budgets, you can't build businesses. If you don't understand contracts, you can't protect yourself." Elara leaned forward. "We're not teaching them to be revolutionaries. We're teaching them to be impossible to exploit." "That's the same thing." "I know." The article ran 3 days later. By that evening, Thornfield Manor was surrounded by protesters. They came with signs and fury: "Protect our daughters," "Traditional values," "Stop the corruption." Most were men, but some were women too. Mothers convinced that education would ruin their daughters' marriage prospects, wives who'd accepted their own limitations and resented anyone questioning the system that had crushed them. Rowan stood at the window, watching the crowd grow. "We could close it temporarily. Let things cool down." "No." "Elara, no." She joined him at the window. "The moment we show weakness, they win. These people don't want compromise. They want us gone. They want you gone. I'm a duke. They can't touch me directly. But you?" He turned to face her. "You're the scandalous woman who seduced their way into my house. You're the target, and if they can destroy you, they destroy everything we've built. Then we don't let them destroy me. It's not that simple." The window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the floor, and Elara felt Rowan's hands pull her down, shield her with his body as rocks and bricks crashed through the opening. Shouting from outside, growing louder, angrier. Someone was leading chants now, organized and vicious. "Whore! Home wrecker! Unnatural woman!" Servants rushed in. The butler, white-faced, trying to maintain composure. "Your Grace, we should move to the interior rooms. The crowd is becoming dangerous." "Get Miss Whitcomb to safety," Rowan ordered. "Now." "I'm not leaving you." "This isn't a debate." His voice went hard. "Go, now." 2 footmen practically carried her to a back room, away from the windows, while Rowan stayed to deal with the mob. Elara pressed her ear to the door, listening to the chaos outside, feeling helpless in a way she hadn't since the night she'd left her family. It took 3 hours and a detachment of police to disperse the crowd. By then, 4 windows were broken. The front gate was damaged, and Elara's name had been screamed so many times it stopped sounding like a word and started sounding like a curse. Rowan found her after midnight, exhausted and bleeding from a cut on his forehead where flying glass had caught him. "You're hurt." "It's nothing." He let her clean the wound anyway, standing still while she worked with shaking hands. The police arrested 6 people. They'll be fined, maybe jailed for a few days, then they'll be released and probably do it again. "This is my fault." "This is society's fault. You're just the excuse." "Rowan, listen to me." He caught her hands, made her meet his eyes. "This is going to get worse before it gets better. You need to understand that. We've challenged something fundamental, and the backlash is going to be brutal. I can protect you to a point, but I'm the weak link. The disgraced daughter with no family, no money, no protection except what you give me. And if they can break me, they break us." "Yes." She pulled away, paced to the window. The glass was boarded up now, but she could still hear echoes of the shouting in her mind. "What do you need me to do?" "I need you to be careful. No more public appearances without security. No more walking to the school alone. No more interviews without my approval." "You want me to hide?" "I want you to survive." He came up behind her, close but not touching. Elara, I am asking you, as your partner, as someone who cares about you, please don't make yourself an easy target. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she wouldn't let fear control her, wouldn't let threats change her behavior. But the terror in his voice stopped her. Okay, she said quietly. I'll be careful. Thank you. But careful wasn't enough. The summons arrived a week later, formal, official, bearing the seal of the royal court. Lady Cordelia Ashcroft requested the honor of the Duke of Thornfield's presence at a gathering celebrating her return to London society, and she graciously extended the invitation to include Miss Elara Whitcomb, whose recent endeavors had captured everyone's attention. Elara stared at the invitation like it might bite her. Who is Lady Cordelia Ashcroft? Rowan's expression went carefully blank. Someone from my past. That's not an answer. Someone I was engaged to, briefly, 4 years ago. The words hit like a punch. Why didn't you mention her before? Because she married a baron and moved to Scotland, and I assumed she'd stay there. He took the invitation, read it again. This is a trap. Obviously, so we don't go. If we don't go, we look afraid, like we're hiding. That's worse than whatever she's planning. And if we do go, then we walk into whatever ambush she's prepared and hope we're smart enough to survive it. He met her eyes. Your choice. Elara thought about the protesters, about the broken windows, about being called a whore by people who'd never met her, about spending her whole life either hiding or fighting, never getting to just exist. We go, she said, but we go prepared. Prepared how? I don't know yet, but Cordelia expects me to be the scared little nobody who got lucky, so we give her someone else entirely. The gathering was at the Ashcroft London residence, which made Thornfield Manor look modest by comparison. 300 guests, maybe more. Every important family in London, every influential voice, every person whose opinion could make or break reputations. Elara wore green, not the pale, washed-out colors her mother had always chosen, but deep emerald that made her look alive, dangerous, awake. Rowan had hired someone to do her hair properly, and for the first time in her life, Elara looked in the mirror and didn't see the spare daughter. She saw someone who might actually belong at an event like this. You look terrified, Rowan said as their carriage approached the estate. I am terrified. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He took her hand. Remember, you're not here to win their approval. You're here to make them question their assumptions. Can you do that? I'll try. That's all I ask. They entered together, and the crowd parted like water. Whispers followed them, not even bothering to be subtle. There was the Duke and his radical mistress. There was the girl who'd been disowned by her own family. There was the scandal everyone had been waiting to watch explode. Lady Cordelia Ashcroft stood at the center of the ballroom like a queen holding court. She was beautiful, not in the fragile, delicate way society preferred, but in a way that felt weaponized. Gold hair, perfect features, a dress that probably cost more than the school's entire operating budget. And when she saw Rowan, her smile was pure triumph. Your Grace, how wonderful you could make it. Her eyes slid to Elara. And you brought your little project. How brave of her to show her face. Rowan's hand tightened on Elara's arm. Warning. Lady Cordelia, you're looking well. Scotland must have agreed with you. Oh, I'm back now, for good. Poor Baron Ashcroft passed away last winter, tragic accident, and I discovered I missed London terribly. Her gaze never left Elara. So many changes since I've been gone. I hear you've taken up charity work. Hardly charity. More like investment in ignored potential. How progressive. Cordelia's smile sharpened. Though I wonder if the investment is financial or personal. The challenge hung in the air like smoke. Both, Elara said before Rowan could respond. The Duke values partnerships where both parties contribute. Novel concept, I know. Indeed, though some partnerships seem rather unbalanced. Tell me, Miss Whitcomb, what exactly do you contribute, besides the entertainment value of watching someone so far out of their depth pretend to swim? Laughter rippled through the nearby crowd. Not loud, not cruel exactly, but there, waiting. I contribute honesty, Elara said, voice steady despite the fear clawing at her throat. Something I suspect is rather rare in rooms like this. Honesty, Cordelia laughed, musical and cutting. How refreshing. And honest women, of course, have no use for things like family, reputation, or the good opinion of people who matter. They simply say whatever they please and expect the world to applaud their courage. Better than saying nothing and expecting the world to mistake silence for virtue. The crowd inhaled sharply. Someone muttered approval. Someone else gasped. Cordelia's expression went cold. You know what I think, Miss Whitcomb? I think you're a clever little opportunist who saw a lonely duke and decided to exploit his momentary interest in novelty. I think you've convinced him that your strange ideas and unfeminine behavior make you special, when really you're just broken in ways most of us learned to hide by age 12. The words landed like arrows, each one finding a wound Elara had thought she'd healed. That's enough, Rowan said, voice dangerous. Is it? Cordelia turned to him, and something in her expression made Elara's stomach drop. Because I think your guests deserve to know the truth about the woman you've been parading around London. About why her own family disowned her, about what kind of person abandons their sisters to pursue selfish ambitions. You don't know anything about me, don't I? Cordelia pulled a letter from her sleeve. This is from your sister Vivian. She wrote to me explaining how you destroyed her engagement, ruined your family's reputation, and walked away without a second thought. Shall I read it aloud? Elara's world tilted. That's not... Vivian wouldn't... Oh, but she did. Would you like to hear her describe you? Selfish, thoughtless, willing to sacrifice anyone for her own desires. Her words, not mine. You're lying. Am I? Cordelia handed her the letter. Elara recognized the handwriting immediately. Vivian's perfect script, every word carefully formed. And the content, accusations, resentments, hurt that Elara had caused and never apologized for. It was real, all of it real. The room spun. Blood rushed in her ears. Every eye was on her, waiting for her response, watching her break. It's true then, someone whispered. She really did abandon them. Poor family, no wonder they cut her off. And the Duke is defending her. How embarrassing. Cordelia's voice rose above the whispers, clear and damning. You see, Your Grace, this is who you've chosen. A woman who destroys everyone around her and calls it courage. A woman who will do the same to you once she's extracted everything useful from your title and fortune. Rowan stepped forward, and Elara had never seen him look so dangerous. Lady Cordelia, you have made a grave miscalculation. Miss Whitcomb is under my protection, and any attack on her is an attack on me. I suggest you reconsider your approach. Or what? You'll defend her honor? Cordelia laughed. She has no honor to defend, and everyone in this room knows it. She's a scandal, a mistake, a woman playing at being something she can never be. And sooner or later you'll realize it too. The silence was absolute. 300 people holding their breath, waiting to see what happened next. Elara looked at Rowan, saw the fury in his eyes, the protective instinct warring with political calculation, saw him about to make a scene that would destroy both of them because he couldn't let her fight this battle alone. She couldn't let that happen. You're right, she said quietly. Everyone stared. I did abandon my family. I did destroy Vivian's engagement. I am selfish and thoughtless and probably will hurt everyone who gets close to me. Her voice cracked. I'm exactly what you said I am. Every terrible thing. You win. Elara? Rowan's voice was shocked, but she was already walking, past Cordelia's triumphant smile, past the whispering crowd, past the judgmental eyes and satisfied expressions, through the ballroom, down the corridor, out into the night where she could finally breathe. She made it to the garden before the tears came. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Heavy, male, running. Elara, wait. Don't. She spun to face him. Don't try to fix this. Don't make excuses. Don't pretend that wasn't the truth. It wasn't the whole truth. It was enough of it. She wrapped her arms around herself, feeling like she might shatter. Vivian wrote that letter, my own sister, the one who told me to go, to choose myself, to not let fear hold me back. She wrote to Cordelia about how much she hates me. People say things they don't mean when they're hurt. She meant it, all of it. I destroyed her future because I was too selfish to think about consequences. I walked away from my family like it was nothing. I am exactly the person Cordelia described, and everyone in that ballroom knows it now. Rowan moved closer, careful, like approaching a wounded animal. You're also the person who opened a school for girls who had no other options, who stood in front of Lady Ashford and called out hypocrisy no one else would name, who chose truth over safety even when it cost you everything. That person matters too. Does she? Because right now it feels like all I do is hurt people. My family, you, everyone who gets close to me. She looked up at him, and the pain in her chest made it hard to breathe. Maybe Cordelia is right. Maybe I'm just broken in ways I don't know how to fix. You're not broken. Yes, I am. And I'm tired, Rowan. Tired of fighting, tired of being strong, tired of pretending I'm not terrified every single day that I'm going to wake up and you'll have realized I'm not worth the trouble. Elara, I need to go. Go where? I don't know. Anywhere. Somewhere I can't destroy anyone else's life just by existing. She stepped back when he reached for her. Thank you for everything. For seeing me when no one else would. For giving me a chance to be something more. But I can't. I can't keep doing this. I'm not strong enough. Don't do this. Don't let her win. She already won. She showed everyone exactly who I am, and it turns out I'm not someone worth defending. She walked past him, out of the garden, through the side gate, into London streets that suddenly felt hostile and foreign. She had no money, no plan, nowhere to go. But she couldn't stay. Couldn't watch Rowan sacrifice more for someone who'd only bring him down. Behind her, she heard him call her name. Once. Twice. She didn't turn around. The boarding house was cheap and anonymous, the kind of place where no one asked questions if you paid in advance. Elara gave the proprietor the last of the money she'd saved from the school's tiny stipend and climbed 3 flights of stairs to a room that smelled like mildew and defeat. She sat on the narrow bed and stared at the water-stained ceiling and tried to figure out how her life had collapsed so completely in the space of one evening. The knock came an hour later, soft, tentative. Elara? It's Rebecca Marsh. The journalist. Elara almost didn't answer, but Rebecca knocked again, more insistent. I know you're in there. Your friend at Thornfield gave me the address. Open the door. Elara opened it. Rebecca stood in the hallway with a notebook and an expression that suggested she'd seen worse tragedies than one woman's breakdown. Can I come in? Why? Because I was at the Ashcroft gathering. I saw what happened. And I think you deserve to know the rest of the story before you decide to disappear completely. There's more? There's always more. Rebecca pushed past her into the room, settled in the single chair like she owned it. Lady Cordelia Ashcroft didn't just happen to have that letter from your sister. She's been collecting ammunition against you for weeks, interviewing your family's servants, bribing former acquaintances, building a case. Why would she care that much? Because you're with Rowan, and before you, she was supposed to be with Rowan. They were engaged, 4 years ago. He broke it off 3 days before the wedding, publicly, spectacularly. Humiliated her in front of everyone. She married Baron Ashcroft to save face, but she never forgot. Elara felt sick. So this was revenge. This was strategic warfare. She spent 4 years rebuilding her reputation, waiting for the right moment to destroy the man who destroyed her. And then you appeared, the perfect target, the nobody with no protection. If she could prove you were worthless, she'd prove Rowan's judgment was worthless, and maybe get him back in the process. She can have him. Can she, though? Rebecca leaned forward. Because the interesting thing is, after you left, Rowan didn't chase you. He walked back into that ballroom and systematically dismantled Lady Cordelia in front of everyone, exposed her husband's debts that she inherited, the affairs she had while pretending to mourn, the blackmail she's been using to control half the families in London. By the time he finished, she was ruined. Elara stared. He wouldn't. He absolutely would. For you. And now Cordelia is threatening to destroy him politically, socially, every way possible. She's calling in favors, spreading rumors, turning his allies against him. Within a week, he'll be completely isolated. Then I need to stay away. If I'm gone, she has no reason to target him. You really believe that? Rebecca's voice was gentle. You think she'll stop now that she's started? No, she'll destroy him anyway, and she'll make sure everyone knows it's because of you. The only question is whether you're there to fight beside him or whether he faces it alone. I can't. Yes, you can. You're scared, which is reasonable. You're hurt, which makes sense. But you're also the only person I've met in 10 years of journalism who actually stands for something real, who builds schools instead of just talking about charity, who tells the truth even when it costs everything. And look where that got me. It got you here, in this moment, where you have a choice. Rebecca stood. Run and prove Cordelia right, that you're just a scared girl playing at Revolution. Or go back and prove her wrong. Prove all of them wrong. Show them that women like us don't break just because the world wants us to. She left before Elara could argue, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a challenge. Elara sat in the silence and thought about everything she'd lost. Her family, her reputation, her certainty that she was doing the right thing. But underneath the loss, underneath the fear and the hurt, something else burned. That anger Rowan had named months ago. The fury at a world that wasted women's potential and called it natural. That crushed intelligence and rewarded performance. That forced people like her to choose between being themselves and being accepted. She thought about the girls in the school, about their faces when they solved problems no one thought they could handle, about the possibilities she'd given them, not of being accepted by society, but of not needing society's acceptance to survive. She thought about Rowan, standing in a ballroom full of enemies, defending her even though it would cost him everything, and she made her choice. She arrived at Thornfield at dawn. The gate was still damaged from the protests, the windows still boarded, but the door opened before she could knock, and Rowan stood there looking like he hadn't slept at all. "You came back." "I shouldn't have left." "You had every right." "No, I ran, like I always run when things get hard." She stepped inside and the words came faster now, desperate to get them out before she lost her nerve. Cordelia was right about one thing. I do hurt people. I did abandon my family. I am selfish and thoughtless and probably will destroy everything I touch. But Rowan, her voice broke. But I'm done running from that. I'm done pretending I can be perfect enough that people won't find reasons to hate me. So I'm going back. To the school, to the fight, to all of it. With you or without you, I'm done being afraid. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her inside, closed the door, and kissed her hard enough that she forgot to breathe. When he finally let her go, his voice was rough. "Cordelia's declared war. She's turned half my business partners against me. 3 families have withdrawn their daughters from the school. Parliament is talking about investigating our finances for impropriety. We have maybe a month before everything collapses." "Then we'd better work fast." "You're sure?" "I've never been less sure of anything in my life. But I'm here anyway." His smile was fierce and proud. "Then let's finish what we started." But neither of them knew that across the city, Lady Cordelia Ashcroft was preparing her final move. The one that would force Elara to face not just society's judgment, but something far more personal. Something that would test whether love and principle could survive when the cost became too high to bear. The real battle was just beginning. The war room, as they started calling it, was actually Rowan's study with papers covering every surface and coffee cups breeding in corners like mushrooms. 3 weeks of strategic planning looked like controlled chaos. Maps of London with notes about which families supported them, which were hostile, which might be swayed. Financial records, legal documents. Rebecca's articles tracking public opinion. A battle plan for fighting an enemy that didn't use swords. "We're losing the narrative," Rebecca said, circling a paragraph in her latest draft. "Cordelia's people are spreading stories faster than we can counter them. Yesterday it was financial impropriety. Today it's moral corruption. Tomorrow it'll probably be witchcraft." "At least that would be interesting," Elara muttered, squinting at a budget sheet. The numbers were starting to blur together. "Focus," Rowan tapped the map. "The Grayson family. Lord Grayson sits on 3 charity boards and controls significant influence in Parliament. If we could get him on our side—" "He thinks women shouldn't read," Elara interrupted. "I heard him say it at a dinner party. Exact words were, 'Literacy in females leads to hysteria and loose morals.'" "Then we skip him." "Lady Morrison?" She pulled her niece from the school last week, called me a corrupting influence. Lord Pemberton. His wife hates me because I told her that spending £500 on a necklace while children starve isn't charity, it's theater. Rowan rubbed his eyes. You really did insult everyone important, didn't you? I didn't plan to. It just kept happening. Rebecca laughed. I like her. That's because you also insult everyone important. Rowan stood, paced to the window. Outside, protesters had returned. Smaller numbers this time, but still there. Still angry. We need something bigger. Something that changes the conversation completely. Like what? I don't know yet, but we're being reactive, responding to Cordelia's attacks instead of forcing her to respond to ours. We need to shift the momentum. The answer came from an unexpected source. Mary Wickham was 16, worked 14 hours a day in a textile factory, and was the best student in Elara's mathematics class. She arrived at Thornfield 3 days later with a ledger she'd stolen from her employer and a black eye she claimed came from walking into a door. Miss Whitcomb, she said, hand shaking as she held out the book. You need to see this. The numbers told a story of systematic theft. Factory owners recording lower wages than they paid to avoid taxes, then paying even lower wages than they recorded and pocketing the difference. Workers cheated twice over. Children logging 60-hour weeks while the books showed 40. Safety equipment purchased on paper but never actually bought. Death benefits recorded as paid but never delivered to grieving families. This is criminal, Elara breathed. This is normal. Mary's voice was flat. Every factory does it. Everyone knows. Nobody cares because we're just workers. We don't matter. Who owns this factory? Mary smiled grimly. Lord Ashford, Lady Cordelia's late husband's business partner. She inherited his share when he died. The room went silent. Rebecca leaned forward, predatory interest lighting her eyes. Can you prove Cordelia knew about this? There are letters, correspondence about the bookkeeping practices. She signed off on them. Mary touched her black eye unconsciously. The foreman caught me copying pages. Said he'd do worse if I told anyone. But I figured Miss Whitcomb taught us that numbers are power, so I brought you the power. Elara wanted to hug her, wanted to tell her she was brilliant and brave and exactly the reason the school mattered. Instead, she said, You can't go back there. It's not safe. I got nowhere else to go. You can stay here, Rowan said immediately. We have rooms. You'll work for the school, help with the younger students, assist with bookkeeping, real wages, safe conditions. Yes? Mary's eyes went wet. Why would you do that for me? Because you just handed us a weapon, and because you deserve better than a system that treats you like you're disposable. He looked at Elara. Can you verify these numbers? I can do better than verify them. I can build a case that proves systematic fraud across multiple businesses. But Rowan? She met his eyes. If we do this, we're not just fighting Cordelia anymore. We're challenging the entire structure that keeps poor people poor and factory owners rich. This gets published, half the House of Lords will want us dead. Good. His voice was steel. Let them try. They worked for 6 days straight. Elara cross-referenced Mary's ledger against public tax records, found patterns of fraud that went back years. Rebecca interviewed factory workers who'd been cheated, built human stories around the cold numbers. Rowan consulted lawyers about the legal implications, about how to make charges stick against someone with Cordelia's resources. On the 7th day, Lady Thornfield walked into the study unannounced. Mother, Rowan stood. I didn't know you were in London. I wasn't. Then I heard my son was preparing to commit social suicide and thought I should intervene. She looked at Elara with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Still here, I see. Stubborn girl. Yes, ma'am. Good. Rowan needs someone stubborn. He's too practical sometimes. Forgets that some things are worth burning down the world for. She settled into a chair without being invited. Now, show me what you're planning. They laid it out. The evidence, the legal strategy, Rebecca's articles ready to publish. The plan to expose not just Cordelia, but the entire network of exploitation that funded London's glittering society. Lady Thornfield listened without interrupting. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You understand this will destroy you both, she said finally. Socially, politically, possibly literally, These people don't forgive threats to their wealth. We know, Rowan said. And you're doing it anyway. We're doing it because someone has to. His mother smiled. Then I suppose I should help. Mother, don't argue with me, boy. I've been navigating society longer than you've been alive. I know exactly which pressures to apply and where. She stood. Publish the articles. I'll handle the social warfare. Lady Cordelia wants to play games? I invented half the rules she's using. Elara stared. Why would you help us? You barely know me. True, but I know my son, and he's never cared about anything the way he cares about this. About you. Lady Thornfield's expression softened slightly. Besides, I'm old, rich, titled. They can whisper about me all they want. I'll be dead before their opinions matter. Might as well use my power for something useful. You'll be ostracized. Let them try. She patted Elara's cheek with surprising gentleness. You remind me of myself 40 years ago, before I learned to behave. I've missed that version of me. Consider this my rebellion by proxy. She swept out, leaving them stunned. Your mother is terrifying, Elara said. I know, it's genetic. Rebecca's article ran on a Wednesday. By Thursday morning, London was on fire. The response was immediate and vicious. Factory owners denied everything. Politicians called it slander. Society ladies clutched pearls and defended Cordelia as a victim of malicious lies. But the workers started talking. More came forward. More ledgers appeared. More stories of wage theft and dangerous conditions, and children worked to death while owners grew rich. Rebecca's office was flooded with testimonies from people who'd been silent for years, waiting for someone to finally listen. This is bigger than Cordelia, Rebecca said, showing them the stacks of correspondence. This is every factory, every mine, every business that's built on exploitation. You've opened something that can't be closed. Then we keep it open, Elara said. We document everything. Build the case until it's impossible to ignore. That'll take months, maybe years. Then we'd better start now. But Cordelia wasn't idle. The counterattack came at the worst possible moment. A carefully orchestrated campaign painting Elara as a manipulator who'd seduced Rowan to gain access to his resources, who'd manufactured evidence to destroy innocent people, who was using factory workers as pawns in her quest for relevance. Forged letters appeared, supposedly from disgruntled school parents claiming Elara had mistreated their daughters. Witnesses came forward, paid, obviously, but convincing, describing her as unstable, vindictive, dangerous. She's trying to make you the villain, Rowan said, reading the latest editorial. Make people choose between believing factory workers or believing a duke's word that you're trustworthy. And which do you think they'll choose? The one that doesn't require them to change anything about how they live. He threw the paper down. We need testimony. Not from workers. They're already dismissed as biased, from someone society has to listen to. Who would that be? I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Vivian Whitcomb opened her door 3 days later to find her disowned sister standing on the doorstep. Elara. Her voice was carefully neutral. I didn't expect to see you. I didn't expect to come. Can I come in? They sat in the drawing room that Elara remembered from childhood, and it felt like visiting a museum of her past life. Everything exactly as it had been. Nothing changed except her. I read your letter, Elara said. The one you sent to Cordelia. Vivian flinched. I was angry. You had every right to be. I did destroy your engagement. I did walk away without thinking about the consequences for you and Celeste and Margot. I was selfish. Yes, you were. Vivian's composure cracked slightly. But I was also jealous. You chose yourself. You walked away from everything we were taught to want, and you survived. More than survived. You're building something real. And I'm still here, performing the same role, pretending I don't want more. Then why did you write that letter? Because Cordelia paid me. The admission came out flat, ashamed. 500 pounds, mother's in debt, father's gambling got worse after you left. We needed the money. So I told Cordelia everything she wanted to know about you, and I told myself it was justified because you'd hurt us first. Elara felt something twist in her chest. Oh, Vivian. I know. I'm not proud of it, but we were desperate and you were so far away, living your principled life while we drowned. She looked up, eyes wet. I'm sorry. For the letter. For what Cordelia did with it. For being too weak to stand up for you when it mattered. You're not weak. You're surviving in a system designed to give you no good choices. That's generous. It's true. Elara leaned forward. Vivian, I need your help. Not for me, for all the girls who come after us. The ones being taught they're worthless if they can't land a rich husband. The workers being cheated by people like Cordelia. I need someone who understands both worlds to tell the truth about what it costs to play society's game. You want me to testify against Cordelia? I want you to tell your story, what she paid you for, what you know about her business practices, what it's like to be a woman with no choices watching other women get exploited. Vivian was quiet for a long moment. If I do this, Mother will disown me too. I'll lose everything. I know, I can't promise it'll be worth it. I can't even promise we'll win. But Vivian, her voice caught, I can promise you won't be alone. Whatever happens, you'll have me, and Rowan, and Rebecca, and a whole network of people who believe women are worth more than their marriage prospects. That's not much of a safety net. No, but it's more than I had when I left, and I survived. Vivian looked at her sister, really looked, maybe for the first time, saw the scars and the strength, the fear and the courage, the woman who'd been the spare, and had somehow become someone who mattered. Okay, she said quietly. I'll do it. The hearing was set for the following week. Not a trial, Cordelia was too well connected for formal charges yet, but a parliamentary inquiry into factory conditions and business practices. Public record. Open to journalists. Impossible to ignore. Rowan spent the days before coaching witnesses, preparing evidence, building an argument that even hostile politicians would have to acknowledge. Elara worked with the factory workers, helping them articulate experiences that had been dismissed as ignorance for so long. Rebecca wrote preliminary pieces, warming up the public to the revelations coming, and Vivian prepared to face her mother's fury. She won't forgive this, she said the night before the hearing, standing in Thornfield's guest room and staring at the dress Elara had helped her choose. Simple, respectable, nothing that could be used to dismiss her as frivolous. She'll say I'm betraying the family. You're not betraying anything. You're telling the truth. In our world, those are the same thing. Vivian turned. Are you scared? Terrified. You? Beyond terrified. But also, she smiled slightly. Also kind of excited? Is that wrong? No, that's exactly right. The hearing room was packed. Every journalist in London, half of Parliament, society figures who'd come to watch the spectacle. Lady Cordelia sat in the front row, perfectly composed, radiating confidence that this was a temporary inconvenience she'd weather with grace. She had no idea what was coming. The first witnesses were factory workers. Halting testimony from people unused to speaking in formal settings, but devastating in its simplicity. A woman who'd lost her son to machinery that should have had safety guards. A man who'd worked 40 years and had nothing to show for it because of wage theft. A girl Mary's age who'd been injured and dismissed without compensation. Cordelia's lawyer tore into them, called them confused, unreliable, motivated by resentment toward their betters, suggested they'd been coached to lie by radical elements seeking to undermine legitimate business. Then Vivian took the stand. State your name for the record, the magistrate said. Vivian Whitcomb, elder sister to Elara Whitcomb. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Cordelia's composure flickered. Miss Whitcomb, you've come forward with information about Lady Cordelia Ashcroft. Please explain. Vivian's voice was steady. Lady Cordelia paid me £500 to provide information about my sister. Specifically, information she could use to discredit Elara publicly. She told me she was building a case to prove the school my sister runs was a front for immoral activity. And did you provide this information? Yes. I was desperate for money, and I convinced myself my sister deserved it for abandoning our family. I was wrong. What changed your mind? I saw what Lady Cordelia did with the information, how she twisted my pain into weapons. how she used legitimate family grievances to destroy someone who was trying to help people. And then I looked at my sister's school, actually looked, and saw girls being taught they're worth something, girls being given choices I never had. Her voice broke slightly. I realized Cordelia wasn't trying to protect morality. She was trying to protect a system that keeps women powerless and workers exploitable, and I couldn't be part of that anymore. You understand you're testifying against a titled lady, that there will be consequences? I understand, but some things are more important than consequences. Cordelia's lawyer stood. Your Honor, this witness is clearly biased. She's also under oath, the magistrate interrupted. Continue, Miss Whitcomb. Lady Cordelia also showed me documents from her late husband's factory. She was bragging about how profitable the business was, how clever they'd been with the bookkeeping. I didn't understand it then, but after talking to my sister, I realized what I'd seen was evidence of fraud. Systematic wage theft, falsified safety records, death benefits recorded as paid but never delivered. Can you prove this? I copied some of the documents while I was at her residence. I brought them today. She handed over papers to the magistrate. I know copying them was wrong, but I thought the truth was more important than propriety. The magistrate reviewed the documents. The room held its breath. These appear to show significant discrepancies between reported and actual wages, between claimed safety expenditures and actual equipment purchases, between recorded death benefits and amounts paid to families. He looked at Cordelia. Lady Ashcroft, do you have an explanation? Cordelia stood, and for the first time her composure was genuinely shaken. Those documents are private business records. They were stolen. They were copied by someone you invited into your confidence to weaponize against another woman, Vivian said quietly. I was a tool in your war against my sister. But tools can turn, Lady Cordelia. You should have remembered that. The hearing exploded, magistrates demanding answers, Cordelia's lawyer trying to object, journalists scribbling frantically, factory owners in the audience suddenly finding reasons to leave early. Rowan caught Elara's hand under the table. She squeezed back hard. This wasn't over. The legal battles would take months. The social warfare would be brutal. But something had shifted. The narrative Cordelia had controlled so carefully was fragmenting, and truth was bleeding through the cracks. The aftermath was chaos. 3 factories were shut down pending investigation. 4 members of parliament called for comprehensive labor reform. Cordelia was socially radioactive. Invitations withdrawn, friends suddenly busy, doors closing in her face the way Elara's had closed for so long. But more importantly, women started showing up at the school. Not just working-class girls anymore, but daughters of shopkeepers and clerks and minor gentry. Women who'd watched Vivian's testimony and thought maybe, just maybe, there was another way to live. We need more space, Elara said, looking at the crowded classroom. More teachers. More resources. I have funding, Lady Thornfield announced, appearing in the doorway. Lord Morrison feels terrible about his wife's behavior and would like to make amends through a generous donation. Lord Pemberton is pretending he never opposed us and offering his townhouse as a second location. Cowards. All of them, but useful cowards. We can't accept money from people we just exposed as exploitative. Then we take their money and use it to teach the next generation how to avoid being exploited. Poetic justice. She smiled at Elara. You're learning, girl. Power isn't about being pure. It's about being practical. That evening, Elara found Vivian in the library reading a mathematics primer. You don't have to study this if you don't want to, Elara said. I know it's not your passion. No, but understanding numbers means understanding where power comes from. You were right about that. Vivian looked up. Mother wrote. Said I'm dead to her. I'm sorry. Don't be. I feel more alive than I have in years. She smiled, and it was genuine. What happens now? Now we build, we teach more girls, we push for labor laws, we keep fighting until the system changes or we die trying. That's either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. Rowan appeared in the doorway. We have a problem. Another one? The Duke of Somerset wants to meet with you. He's head of the Education Committee in the House of Lords. He either wants to shut us down completely or what? Or propose we expand, nationalize the model, Turn your one school into a network across England. He looked stunned. I don't know which option is more terrifying. Elara stood, smoothed her dress, looked at Vivian, then at Rowan, then at the library full of books that had saved her when nothing else could. Then I guess we'd better find out. 3 months ago, she'd been the girl no one chose. The spare daughter, invisible and insignificant. Now she was walking into a meeting with one of the most powerful men in England to discuss revolutionizing education for an entire country. She was still scared, still imperfect, still fighting against a system designed to crush her. But she wasn't alone anymore. And that made all the difference. The Duke of Somerset's office smelled like old leather and older money. Dark wood paneling, portraits of stern-faced ancestors, the kind of room designed to make visitors feel small and temporary while the institution felt eternal. Elara refused to be intimidated. Somerset himself was 70 if he was a day, white-haired and sharp-eyed, watching her the way a hawk watches a mouse that might be more trouble than it's worth. Rowan sat beside her, quiet support, but this meeting was hers to navigate. Miss Whitcomb, Somerset's voice was surprisingly gentle. I've read Rebecca Marsh's articles, followed the parliamentary inquiry, watched your little school become rather infamous. Little seems generous. We have 87 students now. Precisely my point. You've created something that shouldn't exist, educating working-class girls in mathematics and science, and it's thriving. That suggests either you've tapped into something real or you're extraordinarily good at theatrics. I'm terrible at theatrics. Ask anyone who's watched me try to navigate a ball. He almost smiled. The House of Lords is concerned, not because of the education itself, though plenty oppose that, but because of the precedent. If we allow one person to simply create schools outside church or state oversight, where does it end? With educated women who can't be exploited as easily, I'd think that's where you'd want it to end. You'd think, he leaned back, but power structures don't dismantle themselves willingly. Which brings me to my proposal. We nationalize your model. Government funding, official curriculum, expansion across England. You'd oversee implementation, ensure quality, maintain your pedagogical approach. But it would be legitimate, protected, funded properly. Elara felt her heart race. What's the catch? You'd have to compromise. Accept oversight, report to committees who'll question your methods. Navigate bureaucracy that will try to dilute everything that makes your approach effective. Essentially, you'd trade complete autonomy for institutional support. And if I refuse? Then you continue as you are, vulnerable to every political wind, dependent on Rowan's protection, which makes you both targets, building something powerful but fragile. He met her eyes. I'm not trying to threaten you, Miss Whitcomb. I'm trying to offer you a choice between purity and permanence. You can't have both. Rowan's hand found hers under the table, steady, present, but not directing. Her decision. Can I think about it? You have 3 days. Then I present recommendations to the committee, and the window closes. Somerset stood, signaling the meeting's end. For what it's worth, I hope you accept. England needs more people who believe changing things is possible, but I understand if you'd rather keep your hands clean. They walked out into London afternoon, and Elara felt like she was carrying a weight that might crush her or lift her. She couldn't tell which. What are you thinking? Rowan asked. I'm thinking everything we built was supposed to be different. Not part of the system, not compromised by politics and committees and people who don't actually believe women deserve education. But Somerset's right. We're fragile. One bad law, one hostile parliament, one shift in public opinion, and we're gone. If we take his offer, we lock in protections. We expand. We help thousands instead of dozens. She stopped walking. When did I become someone who has to choose between principles and impact? When you started mattering, welcome to real power. It's mostly terrible. She laughed despite herself. That's not encouraging. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true. He turned to face her fully. Elara, whatever you decide, I support it. But I'll tell you what I see. I see someone who spent 6 months building something from nothing, who's faced down mobs and society ladies and her own family's rejection, who's earned the right to make choices that aren't perfect because no choice at this level ever is. So stop looking for the right answer and start looking for the answer you can live with. What if I make the wrong choice? Then we fix it. Together. Like everything else, She spent 2 days reading the proposals Somerset had sent. Detailed plans for curriculum standards, funding structures, oversight mechanisms. Every page a small surrender of autonomy, a negotiation with systems she'd spent months fighting against. On the third day, Vivian found her in the library, surrounded by papers. You look like you're trying to solve an impossible equation. That's because I am. Somerset wants to nationalize the schools, make them official, funded, permanent, but it means giving up control, accepting oversight from people who might not share our values. So you're choosing between building something that lasts and building something that's purely yours. Yes, Vivian sat across from her. Can I tell you something? When I testified against Cordelia, I wasn't thinking about changing society or fighting systems. I was thinking about those girls in your classroom, the ones who looked at numbers like they were magic spells that might save them. And I thought, if this helps even one of them escape the life I'm trapped in, it's worth every consequence. You're not trapped anymore. No, because you chose impact over purity. You left our family, broke the rules, did everything we were taught not to do. And it worked. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not easily, but it worked. She pushed the papers back toward Elara. So stop agonizing over whether this is the right choice and ask yourself, will this help more girls? If yes, then do it. Work out the compromises later. When did you get so wise? When I stopped performing wisdom and started actually thinking. You're a terrible influence. That evening, Elara drafted her response to Somerset. Yes to nationalization. Yes to oversight. Yes to expansion, but with conditions. Mandatory minimum qualifications for teachers, protection against religious doctrine masquerading as education, guaranteed inclusion of mathematics and sciences for all students, regardless of gender. She sealed it before she could second-guess herself. Done? Rowan asked from the doorway. Done. I just agreed to let the government control something I built with my own hands. It feels like betrayal. It feels like growing up. Welcome to adulthood. It's mostly compromise and caffeine. You really need to work on your inspirational speeches. I know. It's tragic. Yeah. The announcement went public 2 weeks later. The Somerset Education Reform Bill, establishing a national network of schools modeled on the Whitcomb Institute, the name they'd given Elara's original school without asking her permission, which she found both annoying and oddly touching. The response was predictably chaotic. Conservatives called it radical indoctrination. Progressives called it insufficient reform. Factory owners predicted economic collapse. Workers celebrated in the streets. And everywhere, people argued about whether educating women would save society or destroy it. You're famous, Rebecca said, showing Elara the newspapers. Her face was printed next to headlines calling her everything from the people's teacher to the woman who broke England. I hate this. Too bad. Fame comes with the territory. Speaking of which, Rebecca pulled out another paper. Lady Cordelia issued a statement. Elara's stomach clenched. What did she say? That she's withdrawing from public life to reflect on her mistakes, that she regrets the pain she caused, that she hopes her testimony she gave 2 days ago apparently, helps advance the reforms she now realizes are necessary. She testified. For us? For herself. She's rebuilding her reputation by pretending she was always on the right side. It's calculated and cynical and probably will work because people love redemption narratives. Rebecca's smile was sharp. But the important thing is, she lost. You won, and now she's scrambling to salvage something from the wreckage. It didn't feel like winning. It felt complicated and messy and incomplete. But maybe that was what real victory looked like. Not total triumph, but forward movement despite everything. The first official meeting of the School Implementation Committee was held in a government building that made Thornfield Manor look modest. 20 committee members, most of whom had opposed the reforms until Somerset made supporting them politically advantageous. Elara was the only woman in the room. She walked in with Rowan on one side and Vivian on the other. Vivian had been appointed as assistant director because apparently her testimony had made her simultaneously notorious and valuable, and tried not to feel like she was walking into a lion's den. Miss Whitcomb. Lord Bancroft, the committee chair, gestured to a seat at the far end of the table. We're pleased you could join us. We have concerns about the proposed curriculum. Of course they did. What concerns? The emphasis on mathematics and sciences. Some committee members feel this is unnatural for female students, that we should focus on domestic skills, literature, perhaps music. So you want to turn the schools into finishing schools. We want to ensure the education is appropriate. Appropriate to whom? To you? To men who've decided women can't handle numbers despite centuries of evidence to the contrary? She kept her voice level, professional, but let the steel show through. The entire point of this reform is teaching girls things they're told they can't learn. If we retreat to appropriate subjects, we're just replicating the system that already exists, and that system has failed spectacularly. Miss Whitcomb, your passion is admirable, but what? But you're afraid of women who understand compound interest and can calculate whether they're being cheated? But you're worried about a population that can think critically instead of accepting whatever they're told? She leaned forward. Let me be clear, Lord Bancroft. I agreed to this committee because Somerset promised we'd expand education, not water it down. If this is just theater, if you're planning to gut the curriculum until it's toothless, then tell me now so I can walk away and we can all stop wasting time. Silence. The kind that felt like everyone had stopped breathing. Somerset cleared his throat. The curriculum stands as proposed. Mathematics, sciences, literature, history. Lord Bancroft, if you have specific concerns about pedagogical approaches, we can discuss methodology. But the subject matter is not negotiable. That was the agreement. Bancroft's face went red. Your Grace, with all respect, then show respect by remembering why we're here. This isn't about maintaining comfort. It's about fixing something that's been broken for generations. Miss Whitcomb has proven her model works. Our job is to scale it, not to sabotage it. Somerset looked around the table. Anyone else want to waste our time suggesting we teach needlework instead of algebra? No one spoke. Excellent. Let's move on to funding allocation. The meeting lasted 3 hours. By the end, Elara's hands were shaking from adrenaline and suppressed rage, but they'd secured agreements on curriculum, teacher qualifications, and funding that actually might work. Walking out, Vivian caught her arm. That was incredible. That was necessary. They'll try again. Different tactics, but same goal, to neuter everything that makes this effective. Then we'll fight again. That's the job now. Rowan was waiting in the hall. Somerset wants to speak with you privately. They found him in a side office, pouring whiskey despite it being mid-afternoon. Drink? Please. He poured 3 glasses. That was well done. Bancroft needed someone to stand up to him. He's used to people being polite while he guts their proposals. I wasn't trying to be impressive. I was trying not to lose everything we built. I know. That's why it was impressive. He sipped his whiskey. Let me give you some advice, Miss Whitcomb. You're going to face versions of Bancroft for the rest of your life. Men who think they can wear you down with bureaucracy and condescension. Some you'll convince, some you'll defeat, some you'll just have to endure until they die or lose power. But here's the secret. He leaned forward. You don't have to win every battle. You just have to win the ones that matter. And the ones that matter are the ones that change actual lives. Everything else is noise. How do I tell the difference? You ask yourself, will this help the girls in the classroom? If yes, it matters. If no, let it go. Save your energy for fights worth having. It was the most useful advice anyone had given her in months. The schools opened across England over the next year. Slowly at first, pilot programs in 3 cities, then 6, then 12. Each one a fight. Each one opposed by someone with power and fear. But each one also filled with girls hungry for knowledge, desperate for options, ready to become something more than their circumstances allowed. Elara traveled constantly. London to Manchester, to Birmingham to Liverpool, training teachers, fighting committee members, watching the network grow beyond anything she'd imagined in that first warehouse classroom. You're exhausted, Rowan said one night, finding her asleep at her desk with reports spread around her like fallen leaves. I'm effective. You're both, but mostly exhausted. He helped her to bed, and she was too tired to argue. Elara, you don't have to do everything yourself. We have staff now, regional directors, people whose job is to handle the details. But what if they handle them wrong? Then we fix it. But you can't personally oversee 30 schools. You'll burn out, and then everything collapses because we lost the person holding it together. I'm not holding it together. The teachers are. The students are. You're the reason they believe it's possible. That matters. But it only matters if you survive long enough to keep fighting. She knew he was right. Hated it, but knew it. Okay, I'll delegate more. Let other people handle the regional implementation. Focus on strategy instead of execution. Thank you. But I'm not giving up the curriculum oversight. That's non-negotiable. I didn't expect you to, but 2 years after the Somerset Bill passed, the schools were teaching 1,500 girls across 20 cities. 2 years after that, 5,000 girls in 40 cities. The numbers grew, and with them, the stories. Girls who became bookkeepers, accountants, teachers themselves. Women who negotiated better wages because they could calculate what they were owed. Mothers who taught their daughters that intelligence was valuable, that thinking was power, that they didn't have to accept the limitations society imposed. But the victory was incomplete. Factory conditions improved in some places, stayed brutal in others. Women still couldn't vote, own property after marriage, control their own lives fully. The system bent, but didn't break. We're winning, Rebecca said, reviewing statistics in what had become their weekly strategy meeting. Slowly, imperfectly, but we're winning. It doesn't feel like winning when I read about another girl dying in a factory that should have been shut down. No, but it feels like winning when I read about a girl who escaped that factory because your school gave her options. You can't save everyone, Elara, but you've saved enough that the world is measurably different than it was 4 years ago. That's not nothing. It wasn't nothing. But it wasn't everything either, and Elara was learning to live with that tension between the change they'd created and the change still needed, between perfection and progress. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday. Heavy paper, official seal, the kind of formality that usually meant trouble. "You're being summoned to the palace," Rowan said, reading over her shoulder. "The Queen wants to meet you." "Why?" "Probably to yell at you for disrupting society, or to give you a medal. With royalty, you never know until you're there." That's not comforting. It's not meant to be. It's meant to be true. 3 days later, Elara stood in a palace receiving room wearing the most expensive dress she'd ever owned, green again because she'd decided that was her armor, and trying not to panic. The Queen was smaller than expected, older, sharper, watching Elara with eyes that had witnessed decades of political maneuvering and probably saw through every polite lie ever told in her presence. "Miss Whitcomb, I've heard much about you." "Your Majesty, I hope some of it was positive. Some of it was scandalized, which is nearly as good. You've caused quite a disruption to our social order. I've tried to fix parts of it that were broken, Your Majesty. If that caused disruption, perhaps the order needed disrupting." Dangerous words. True words. I found they're often the same thing. The Queen almost smiled. "Somerset tells me your schools are remarkably effective, that girls from working families are learning mathematics and sciences at levels that rival boys from wealthy homes, that you've proven education has less to do with gender than with opportunity." "That's been my experience, yes." "And what do you hope these educated girls will do? Surely you don't expect society to simply change to accommodate them." "I expect society to change because they force it to. Because women who understand numbers can't be cheated. Women who understand science can't be convinced their inferiority is natural law. Women who've been taught to think will raise children who question the systems that oppress their mothers. Change doesn't happen because institutions decide to be generous. It happens because people make it impossible for institutions to stay the same." That sounds like revolution. It sounds like evolution. Revolution would be faster and probably more violent. The Queen studied her for a long moment. "You remind me of someone I used to know, myself, before I learned that power means knowing when to push and when to wait." She stood, and Elara instinctively dropped into a curtsy. "I'm establishing a royal commission on women's education. I'd like you to serve on it, official position, crown appointment, salary and protection that comes with royal backing." Elara's mind spun. "Your Majesty, I'm honored, but you're wondering what the catch is. The catch is you'll have to work with people who oppose everything you stand for. You'll have to compromise, negotiate, accept partial victories while fighting for complete ones. You'll have to become part of the establishment you've spent 4 years challenging. That sounds like selling out. That sounds like growing up. Again. The Queen's smile was knowing. Miss Whitcomb, you can stay on the outside throwing rocks at the palace, or you can come inside and change what the palace does. Both have value. But only one has lasting impact. Your choice. It was Somerset's offer all over again. Purity or permanence, principles or power. Elara thought about the girls in the classrooms, about Mary, who was now running a school in Manchester, about Vivian, who'd found purpose teaching women to escape the traps she'd been caught in, about every person who'd risked something because they believed change was possible. I accept, on one condition. You're negotiating with the Queen? I'm ensuring my effectiveness isn't compromised. I need final authority over curriculum decisions within the Commission, not subject to vote, not open to debate. The education content is mine to control, or I'm useless to you. That's quite bold. That's quite necessary. You're not appointing me because I'm polite, Your Majesty. You're appointing me because I'm effective. And I'm effective because I refuse to compromise on what matters. So, do we have an agreement? The Queen laughed, genuinely laughed. Yes, Miss Whitcomb, we have an agreement, though I suspect I'll regret giving you that much autonomy. Probably, but you'll appreciate the results. Walking out of the palace, Rowan was waiting in the carriage. Well? I just negotiated with the Queen and won. I don't know whether to celebrate or have a panic attack. Both, definitely both. He pulled her close. I'm proud of you. Don't be proud yet. Now comes the hard part, actually changing things from inside the system instead of attacking it from outside. What if I'm better at attacking? Then you'll learn to build, like you've been learning for 4 years, like you'll keep learning for the next 40. 40 years sounds exhausting. 40 years sounds like enough time to actually fix things. She leaned against him, felt his heartbeat steady against her cheek. Thought about the impossible distance between that first charity meeting where Lady Ashford dismissed her, and this moment, with royal appointment and real power and the ability to change lives at scale. Rowan? Yes? Marry me. He went still. What? Marry me. Not because society expects it, not because of my reputation or your title or any of that theater, but because I want to build the next 40 years with you, because you saw me when I was invisible and stayed when I was scandal. Because partnership isn't just a concept we built schools around, it's what we are. So, she pulled back to look at him. What do you say? His smile was brighter than any she'd seen. I say you're terrible at romantic proposals. I know. I'm working on it. I say you're the most infuriating, brilliant, stubborn woman I've ever met. Also working on that. I say yes. Obviously yes. I've been waiting for you to realize we were building a life together, not just a political movement. They're the same thing. I know. That's why I love you. He kissed her then, soft and certain, and Elara felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for 23 years. Not completion, she'd never be completed by another person, had never wanted that, but partnership. Real, messy, imperfect partnership that meant facing the next 40 years of fights with someone who wouldn't let her face them alone. They married 3 months later in a ceremony that scandalized half of London and inspired the other half. No elaborate affair, no months of planning, just a simple ceremony at Thornfield with 200 guests, mostly teachers and students and workers whose lives had been changed by the schools, people who mattered more than titles or pedigree. Vivian stood as witness. Rebecca documented everything for an article that would make romantics weep and conservatives furious. Lady Thornfield cried genuine tears and tried to hide it. Even Somerset attended, looking vaguely amused by the whole thing. But the moment Elara remembered most was standing at the front of the room, looking out at the crowd, and seeing faces that reflected her own journey. Women who'd been told they were wrong, too much, not enough. Women who'd chosen themselves anyway and survived. Women who were building something better than what they'd inherited. Ready? Rowan asked beside her. For marriage or for the next 40 years of fighting? Both. They're the same thing. Then yes, I'm ready. 5 years later, the Royal Commission published its final recommendations. Comprehensive education reform. mandated minimum standards for all schools regardless of gender, protections for teachers who taught controversial subjects, funding mechanisms that didn't depend on charity or church control. It wasn't perfect. Plenty of regions ignored the recommendations. Plenty of families still kept daughters home, convinced education would ruin them. Plenty of men still believed women were naturally inferior, and no amount of evidence would change their minds. But 70 schools became 300, became 600. Girls who would have spent their lives in factories or as servants became accountants, teachers, business owners, scientists. A generation grew up believing intelligence wasn't gendered, that thinking was valuable, that they deserved more than the limitations previous generations had accepted. Elara was 43 when the Whitcomb Institute's first student became a member of parliament. She sat in the gallery watching the young woman, now 30, confident, brilliant, give her maiden speech about labor reform and felt something close to vindication. "You did this," Rowan whispered beside her. "We did this. All of us. Everyone who believed it was possible. Still, you were the one who refused to accept no for an answer. You were the one who chose yourself when everyone said you shouldn't." She thought about that girl in the ballroom 20 years ago, the one everyone dismissed, the spare daughter who didn't matter, the girl who'd been chosen once by a duke who saw something real beneath the surface, and who'd chosen herself every day since. "I was lonely," she said quietly. "That first night when you stopped in front of me. I was so lonely I'd convinced myself it was normal, that being unseen was just how life worked for people like me. And now? Now I'm tired and frustrated and constantly fighting people who want to undo everything we've built. But I'm not lonely. Not ever. Even when I'm angry or scared or convinced we're losing, I'm surrounded by people who believe the same things I do, who fight the same fights, who won't let me give up even when I want to." That sounds exhausting. It is. It's also the best life I could have imagined. Better than I deserved. You deserve everything good that's happened, and more. She took his hand, felt the calluses from years of working alongside her instead of just funding her vision. "Thank you." For what? For stopping that night, for seeing me, for choosing me when I was nobody. You were never nobody, you were just waiting for someone to pay attention. Below them, the new parliament member was finishing her speech. Passionate, articulate, unafraid to challenge systems that had stood for centuries. The chamber was listening, actually listening, not just tolerating a woman's presence, but engaging with her ideas. It wasn't enough. It would never be fully enough. But it was more than nothing. It was progress. And progress, Elara had learned, wasn't a destination. It was a direction. A choice made daily to keep pushing, keep building, keep believing that the next generation could inherit something better than what you'd been given. The girl nobody chose had become the woman who changed everything. Not by being perfect, not by having all the answers, not by winning every fight or never making mistakes, but by refusing to disappear. By choosing herself even when the world said she shouldn't, by building something real in a world made of performances. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.